The plan, as Jimin laid it out over coffee the next morning, was simple in theory but terrifying in practice. "You need to make him notice you," Jimin said, stirring his latte thoughtfully. "Not as a student. As a man." "And how exactly do I do that?" Jimin's grin was positively devilish. "You're Jungkook. You know exactly how to do that. You've just been too scared to actually try." Jungkook's jaw clenched. "I'm not scared." "Then prove it. Next class, turn on the charm. Really turn it on. See if you can crack that professional facade of his." So on Monday, Jungkook dressed with deliberate intent. He wore a white button-up shirt, but left the top 3 buttons undone, showing a tantalizing glimpse of his chest and collarbones. His black jeans were tight enough to be interesting, and he'd styled his hair to look effortlessly tousled. The tattoos on his arms were on full display. "Holy shit," Jimin breathed when he saw him. "You're really going for it. Go big or go home, right?" They walked into class, and Jungkook chose a seat in the 3rd row, close enough to be visible, far enough to not be obvious. He sprawled in his chair with calculated casualness, his legs spread, one arm draped over the back of the empty seat next to him. When Taeyoung entered, Jungkook was ready. He watched as Taeyoung set down his briefcase, as he turned to write on the board. And when Taeyoung turned back to face the class, Jungkook made sure their eyes met. He didn't look away. Taeyoung faltered for just a fraction of a second, his words catching before he smoothly continued. "Today we'll be covering differential equations." Throughout the lecture, Jungkook kept his gaze fixed on Taeyoung with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. Not staring blankly, but really watching. His eyes tracking every movement, every gesture. When Taeyoung's gaze swept across the room, Jungkook was always there, holding eye contact for just a beat too long to be innocent. 20 minutes into the lecture, Jungkook raised his hand. "Yes, Mr. John?" Taeyoung's voice was steady, but Jungkook caught the slight tension in his shoulders. "Could you explain that last part again?" Jungkook asked, his voice low and smooth. "I want to make sure I really understand it." Taeyoung repeated the explanation, and Jungkook leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand, his full attention on the professor. As Taeyoung spoke, Jungkook slowly brought his pen to his lips, holding it between his teeth, his eyes never leaving Taeyoung's face. He saw the moment it registered. Taeyoung's eyes flickered to Jungkook's mouth, to the pen caught between his teeth, before quickly darting away. The professor's explanation stumbled slightly before he recovered. Does that clarify things?" Taeyoung asked, his voice just a touch rougher than before. "Perfectly, Professor," Jungkook said, pulling the pen from his mouth slowly. "Thank you." Beside him, Jimin was practically vibrating with suppressed laughter. As the lecture continued, Jungkook upped the action. The lecture hall was warm, and he made a show of being affected by it, reaching up to undo another button on his shirt with casual, deliberate movements. He ran a hand through his hair, knowing it drew attention to his arms, to the ink decorating his skin. When he caught Taeyoung looking, he let a small knowing smile play across his lips. Taeyoung's jaw tightened, and he turned back to the board with more force than necessary. Halfway through class, Jungkook asked another question, and this time when Taeyoung answered. Jungkook bit his lower lip softly, as if concentrating hard on the explanation. His eyes were dark, intense, and wholly focused on the professor. Taeyoung's words actually stopped mid-sentence this time. He blinked, visibly collecting himself. Excuse me. Where was I?" A few students looked confused, but Jungkook just smiled sweetly. You were explaining the integration process, Professor. Right. Yes. Taeyoung's ears were slightly pink, and he resolutely kept his gaze on the board as he continued. For the rest of the class, there was a palpable tension in the room, at least between Jungkook and the front of the classroom. Jungkook could practically feel Taeyoung's awareness of him. The way the professor's eyes kept being pulled in his direction before forcing themselves away. When Taeyoung announced a short break, he actually loosened his tie slightly, and Jungkook felt a surge of heat. "You're killing him," Jimin whispered, barely containing his glee. "Look at him. He's completely flustered." "Good," Jungkook murmured back, his eyes tracking Taeyoung as he left the room, presumably to get some air. When the class resumed, Jungkook continued his campaign. Every time he caught Taeyoung's eye, he held the gaze until the professor looked away first. When he shifted in his seat, it was with a languid grace designed to draw attention. When he leaned back, stretching his arms above his head, his shirt rode up slightly, revealing a strip of toned stomach. Taeyoung's composure was definitely cracking. His explanations weren't as smooth, his movements less fluid. Twice, he lost his train of thought entirely. As class drew to a close, Taeyoung stood at the front of the room, his hands gripping the edges of the desk. "That's all for today. Don't forget the assignment is due Wednesday." Students began gathering their things, and Jungkook took his time, deliberately slow in packing his bag. "Mr. John." Taeyoung's voice cut through the noise of departing students. Firm and authoritative. The entire class quieted, turning to look. "Please stay after class. We need to discuss your recent performance." The room erupted in whispers and knowing looks. Being called to stay after class was never a good sign. But Jungkook felt nothing but satisfaction. He caught Jimin's eye, and his best friend was grinning like a maniac. "Of course, Professor," Jungkook said smoothly, settling back into his seat. The other students filed out, several glancing back at Jungkook with curiosity or sympathy. Jimin squeezed his shoulder as he passed, whispering, "Don't do anything I wouldn't do." "That leaves a lot of options," Jungkook murmured back. Finally, the room was empty except for the two of them. Taeyoung stood at the front, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. "Come here," Taeyoung said quietly. Jungkook stood, taking his time walking down the aisle. Each step felt significant, purposeful. When he reached the front, he leaned against one of the desks in the first row, casual and confident. "Yes, Professor?" Taeyoung's eyes were dark, intense. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" "I don't know what you mean," Jungkook said innocently, even as his lips curved into a small smirk. "Don't play games with me, Jungkook." The use of his first name sent a thrill through him. "Your behavior in class today was completely inappropriate." "Was it?" Jungkook tilted his head. "I was just paying attention. Taking your advice about being challenged seriously." "You were." Taeyoung stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "You were being deliberately distracting." "Distracting to whom?" Jungkook pushed off the desk, taking a small step closer. "To the other students? Or to you, Professor?" Taeyoung's jaw clenched. "This isn't appropriate." "You keep saying that," Jungkook observed, taking another step. "But you're not actually telling me to stop." "I'm your professor." "And I'm 22 years old," Jungkook interrupted. "An adult, capable of making my own decisions." "This can't happen," Taeyoung said, but his voice lacked conviction. His eyes flickered down to where Jungkook's shirt was still unbuttoned, revealing the smooth expanse of his chest, before snapping back up. Can't. Jungkook was close now. Close enough to see the fine tremor in Taehyung's hands. Or shouldn't. Both, Taehyung breathed, but he didn't move away. Jungkook, you need to understand. I understand perfectly, Jungkook said softly. I understand that you feel this too. This tension between us. The way you watch me when you think I'm not looking. The way your breath catches when I get close. That's... Taehyung's protests were getting weaker. Tell me I'm wrong, Jungkook challenged, his voice dropping lower. Look me in the eye and tell me you don't feel anything, and I'll stop. I'll go back to being just another student. But if you can't... He let the implication hang in the air. Taehyung stared at him, conflict warring in his beautiful eyes. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, his whole body tense. I can't tell you that, he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But that doesn't change the facts. You're my student. There are rules, ethics. Then fail me, Jungkook said recklessly. Tank my grades. Make it so I need private tutoring. Give me a reason to see you outside of class, away from all these rules and boundaries. Taehyung's eyes widened. You want me to academically sabotage you? I want you to find a way for us to spend time together that doesn't violate your precious ethics, Jungkook corrected. Private tutoring is perfectly legitimate. Nothing inappropriate about a professor helping a struggling student. Except you're not actually struggling. Aren't I? Jungkook's smile was sharp. I think I'm struggling quite a bit, Professor. Just not with mathematics. The air between them crackled with tension so thick Jungkook could taste it. Taehyung looked torn, desire and duty waging war across his features. This is insane, Taehyung finally said. I know, Jungkook agreed. But tell me you're not considering it. Taehyung closed his eyes, his chest rising and falling with measured breaths. When he opened them again, there was resignation mixed with something that looked dangerously like anticipation. I'll review your next assignment very carefully, he said slowly. And if I find that your performance is lacking, we'll discuss additional support options. It wasn't a yes. But it wasn't a no either. Jungkook's grin was huge. I look forward to it, Professor. As he left the classroom, he could feel Taehyung's eyes on him the entire way. He pulled out his phone the moment he was in the hallway. Mission accomplished. He's considering it. Jimin's response was immediate. You absolute legend, fire, fire, fire. Jungkook changed his outfit 4 times before the first tutoring session. Just wear something normal, he muttered to his reflection. Stop being ridiculous. He finally settled on dark jeans and a white button-up shirt. But this time, he left the top 4 buttons undone. The fabric parting to reveal the toned planes of his chest and the edge of a tattoo that curved along his collarbone. Casual, but definitely not innocent. His friends had different opinions. You look like you're going on a date. Youngie observed when Jungkook stopped by their usual hangout spot before the session. A very specific kind of date, Hoseok added with a knowing grin. The kind that ends with someone's hands in your hair. You smell like a cologne commercial, Namjoon noted. I hate all of you. Jimin just grinned, circling him like a shark. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. He won't know what hit him. That's not, we're just studying, Jungkook gave up. I'll text you later. If you can still form clear sentences, Jimin called after him. Jungkook arrived at Taehyung's office at exactly 6 o'clock, his heart hammering against his ribs. He took a breath, rolled his shoulders back, and knocked. Come in, Taehyung called. The office was small but elegant, filled with books and papers organized with meticulous care. Tae-young sat behind his desk, and he'd changed from his lecture clothes into something more casual. A soft gray cardigan over a white shirt. He looked younger like this, softer. And Jungkook wanted to ruin that composure all over again. Tae-young's eyes flickered over Jungkook's appearance, lingering for just a moment on the open collar of his shirt before snapping back to his face. "Have a seat." But Jungkook had other plans. Instead of taking the chair across from the desk, he moved around to Tae-young's side, setting his bag down and leaning against the desk right next to where the professor sat. "I think I can see the board better from here," he said innocently, even though there was no board. Tae-young's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Jungkook, you said we should review where I went wrong," Jungkook interrupted smoothly, pulling out his assignment. "So let's review." For the first 20 minutes, they maintained a semblance of normalcy. Tae-young explained concepts with his usual patience, though his voice was slightly tenser than usual. Jungkook asked questions, took notes, and tried to focus on the mathematics. But the proximity was intoxicating. He could smell Tae-young's cologne, could feel the warmth radiating from him. Every time Tae-young reached across to point at something on the paper, their arms would brush, sending electricity through Jungkook's skin. "Let me try this one," Jungkook said, picking up Tae-young's pen. He deliberately leaned forward, bending over the desk in a way that made his shirt fall open even more, revealing more of his chest. He felt more than heard Tae-young's sharp intake of breath. That's the right approach," Tae-young managed, his voice rougher than before. Jungkook worked through the problem slowly, making sure to shift his position frequently, to brush against Tae-young's shoulder, to invade his space in subtle, deliberate ways. At one point, he leaned so close their faces were only inches apart, ostensibly to see what Tae-young was writing. "Like this?" Jungkook asked softly, his breath ghosting across Tae-young's cheek. Tae-young's hand trembled slightly as he wrote. "Yes, exactly like that." The tension in the small office was suffocating. Jungkook could see the pulse hammering in Tae-young's throat. Could see the way his pupils had dilated, darkening his eyes. "I'm having trouble with this part," Jungkook said, pointing to an equation. It was a lie, he understood it perfectly, but it gave him an excuse to move even closer. Tae-young began explaining. But Jungkook wasn't listening. He was watching the way Tae-young's lips moved, the elegant line of his jaw, the way a strand of hair had fallen across his forehead. Unable to resist, Jungkook shifted his position, standing now instead of leaning, positioning himself directly in front of Tae-young. The professor was still seated, which put them at an interesting height difference. Jungkook looking down, Tae-young forced to look up. "Show me again," Jungkook said, his voice dropping lower. "I want to make sure I really understand." Tae-young swallowed hard, his throat working. "Jungkook, what are you?" "I'm studying, Professor," Jungkook said innocently, but his eyes told a different story. "Isn't that what we're here for?" He leaned down, bringing his face closer to Tae-young's under the pretense of looking at the paper. Their faces were so close now that Jungkook could count Tae-young's eyelashes, could see the faint freckles scattered across his nose. "This isn't appropriate," Tae-young breathed, but he didn't move away. "You keep saying that," Jungkook murmured. His eyes dropped to Tae-young's lips. "But you're not stopping me." "I should. But you won't." The air between them crackled with tension so thick it was almost visible. Tae-young's hands gripped the armrests of his chair, knuckles white with the effort of restraint. His chest was rising and falling rapidly, his breath coming in short gasps. "Jungkook." Tae-young's voice was barely a whisper. "We can't." "Can't we?" Jungkook closed the final distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, giving Taehyung every chance to pull away. Their lips barely touched, a whisper of contact that sent shockwaves through Jungkook's entire body. Taehyung froze, his eyes wide with shock. "Jungkook, no!" He started to protest, trying to lean back. But Jungkook wasn't done. He brought his hand up to cup Taehyung's jaw, his thumb brushing across the professor's cheekbone as he kissed him again. Deeper this time. More certain. "Stop," Taehyung gasped against his lips, but it came out breathless, desperate. "We can't do this. I'm your professor. This is..." Jungkook kissed him again, swallowing the protest. His other hand came up to thread through Taehyung's hair, tilting his head back to deepen the kiss even further. "This is wrong," Taehyung tried again, even as his hands came up to Jungkook's chest. Whether to push him away or pull him closer, neither of them was sure. "Then tell me to stop," Jungkook murmured against his lips. "Really tell me. Mean it." Taehyung opened his mouth, and Jungkook waited, his heart pounding. If Taehyung truly wanted him to stop, he would. Immediately. No questions asked. But the words never came. Instead, Taehyung's eyes fluttered closed, and a soft, defeated sound escaped his throat. "I can't," he whispered. "God help me, I can't." That was all the permission Jungkook needed. He kissed Taehyung with renewed intensity, pouring weeks of pent-up desire into it. His hands moved from Taehyung's hair to his shoulders, his waist, learning the shape of him. Taehyung's cardigan was soft under his fingers, and he wanted to tear it off, to feel skin against skin. Taehyung made a sound, half gasp, half moan, and suddenly his hands were no longer pushing but pulling, fisting in Jungkook's open shirt and dragging him even closer. The kiss turned desperate, hungry, months of tension finally exploding between them. Jungkook used his position to his advantage, gently but firmly guiding Taehyung back in his chair, leaning over him, dominating the kiss with a confidence that came naturally. He felt Taehyung surrender beneath him, felt the moment the professor stopped fighting, and gave himself over completely to the sensation. "Jungkook," Taehyung gasped when they broke apart for air, his lips swollen and red. "This is insane." "I know," Jungkook said, trailing kisses along Taehyung's jaw, down to his neck. "But you want this as much as I do. That doesn't make it right." "Stop thinking," Jungkook commanded softly, his lips finding that sensitive spot just below Taehyung's ear. "For once in your life, just feel." Taehyung's response was a shuddering breath, his head tilting back to give Jungkook better access. His hands were still clutching Jungkook's shirt, holding on like he was drowning and Jungkook was his only lifeline. "We're going to regret this," Taehyung whispered. But even as he said it, his hands were sliding up Jungkook's chest, pushing the shirt off his shoulders to reveal more of the tattoos beneath. "Then let's make it worth regretting," Jungkook said against his skin. He pulled back just enough to look at Taehyung. Really look at him. The professor's usual composure was completely shattered. His hair was messed up from Jungkook's fingers, his clothes disheveled, his eyes dark with desire. He looked absolutely wrecked, and it was the most beautiful thing Jungkook had ever seen. "You're so beautiful," Jungkook breathed, tracing his thumb across Taehyung's lower lip. "Do you have any idea what you do to me?" Taehyung's eyes were glazed, unfocused. "Jungkook, Whatever he was going to say was lost as Jungkook kissed him again, slower this time, savoring it. He took his time exploring Taehyung's mouth, learning what made him gasp, what made him moan, what made his fingers dig into Jungkook's shoulders. They stayed like that for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Jungkook leaning over Taehyung's chair, kissing him like his life depended on it, Taehyung responding with equal fervor, all his careful control abandoned. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Taehyung looked dazed. This changes everything, he said softly. I know, Jungkook replied, his forehead resting against Taehyung's. And I don't care. Taehyung laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. You should care. We both should. This could ruin both our lives. Or, Jungkook said, pulling back to meet his eyes, it could be the best thing that ever happened to us. Taehyung stared at him for a long moment, conflict warring in his expression. Then slowly, he reached up and cupped Jungkook's face in his hands. You're going to be the death of me, Jungkook. Jungkook grinned. What a way to go. He kissed him again, softer now, sweeter. And this time, Taehyung didn't protest at all. When Jungkook finally left the office an hour later, his lips swollen and his heart racing, he pulled out his phone with shaking hands. We kissed. Actually kissed. Multiple times. I think I'm dying. Jimin's response was instantaneous. What? Details. Nah. Emergency meeting at your place. Jungkook smiled, touching his lips with his fingers. He could still taste Taehyung, could still feel the ghost of his touch. Yeah. This had definitely been worth it. To be continued. Hope you liked this episode. Sorry I was late updating. Please stay tuned to the last part. I promise to release it soon. Love you all. Thanks for watching.